Hello, fellow sewing enthusiasts. I'm Sarah Gunn from the fashion blog Goodbye Valentino. This year, I'm sewing my clothes rather than shopping. It's also known as the ready-to-wear fast. Now, one of the styles I really like to wear and sew is a simple dress sewn from a stable knit. Stable knits are your heavier knits with a little less stretch. They're perfect for these kind of dresses because they're comfortable, they're less prone to wrinkle, they maintain their shape beautifully, and they're suitable for a variety of silhouettes. Today I'm going to share with you some of my tips for sewing these knit dresses that will provide you with smooth hem lines and smooth necklines. Now, there are many patterns available today that are designed just for knits. I'm going to be working with one of my favorite patterns that I've sewn many times before. I love this pattern due to the slightly raised waistline, the fit, and its easy assembly. Now, before we move on to the dress construction, let's talk about thread for a moment. When a fabric stretches, the seam needs to stretch too, or else it will snap and break. Often, knits are sewn with a narrow zigzag stitch that provides stretch in the seam. But today's stretch threads expand with the fabric, allowing you to use a straight stitch in your seam that will not snap or break when stretched. Let's look. Okay, here is about a 8-inch length of thread, and it easily stretches to another 4 inches. I would say it stretches about 50%. It produces wonderful top stitching as well when you're working with knits. Here's a sample of the straight stitch in this knit, and you see how easily it stretches without snapping. Okay, now I'm wearing a dress sewn from a scuba knit, and that's the fabric I'm going to be working with today. This scuba knit is a little too heavy to comfortably accommodate a neckband or an additional layer of facing. In order to avoid that chunky homemade look, it's necessary to remove all of the excess fabric away from your neckband. So I do this. All right, I have attached the front and back upper bodice at the shoulders. I have finished the shoulder seams, and I have pressed them towards the back. The next thing I do is I run a machine basting stitch around the seam line at about 5/8 inch. Then I fold, or I turn the bodice, the back side of the bodice towards me, and I use this basting stitch as a fold line. And I pin the neckline in place. I first start at large intervals just to secure it. And then, to assure that I don't have any slipping, I go in and I fill in any of the spaces, pinning at about a 1/2 inch interval until it looks like this. It's important to use ballpoint pins with your knits because they will not damage your fabric. Now, I know this is a lot of pins. You might want to just hand baste this stitch in place before taking it to the machine, but if you're comfortable sewing with pins, then take it straight over to the machine. Okay, so I've got my stretch thread in the bobbin and in the upper thread. Now, I'm going to stitch about 3/8 of an inch from the edge of the fabric. I go very slow and I leave my needle in the down position. Okay, I'm just going to sew a little bit. But as you can tell, this stretch thread is producing a beautiful top stitching on the fabric. Now, here it is. I've completed the top stitching. and I have about 1/4 of an inch of excess fabric. So at this point, I'm going to take my scissors. I've already got it started, and I'm just going to cut right up against the stitching. Don't be afraid, but be careful. You'll have a nice clean finish for your neckline. Press it, it'll be nice, smooth, and flat, and you can remove the basting line at that point. Okay, I like to finish my dress with a hem that reflects the same amount of care that I've put into the rest of the dress. And stabilizing your hem will eliminate that potential for a wavy hem. Now, I do this by first marking the fabric with a heat-soluble pen. I love these pens because once the iron touches the fabric, the ink is gone. I'm choosing about a 1 3/4 inch hem, where I just mark. Then I cut a 1-inch piece of lightweight fusible interfacing, and I place that fabric directly below the markings. Now, here it is. It's already adhered to the fabric. Okay, the markings have disappeared from the pen, and so I go in and pin from the back right at the top of the interfacing. Now, the reason I do this is because it marks a fold line. So turning it to the right side, I've got this nice, neat fold line, and I don't have to go back in and find the top of the interfacing. So I pin it again with ballpoint pins. I take it to the machine, and I stitch a 1-inch hem. Now, I'm just going to use a single stitching line, but if you like that sportier look, after completing your first stitching line, you can go in and put a second line in right beside it. All right, so here's the hem, the completed hem, and as you can tell, I've got about a 1/2 inch of excess fabric. I followed the same steps that I did with the neckline, and I just go in with my scissors and I cut right against the stitching line. You can go in and clean up a little bit if you've missed an area or two. This side I have finished, and as you can tell, there's absolutely no bulk in the hem. So, when you're sewing with stable knits, don't forget your stretch thread. Sew these fabrics with care, and you'll be rewarded with fantastic results.